friends, it's Bryn, and welcome back to the channel. Last year, I got in such a book slump, and I barely read at all, which is kind of unfortunate. So I made it a point at the beginning of this year that I was just going to read well, and I was going to read often, like as often as I could just throughout 2018, and try and get back into the habit of reading consistently. If you've been here a while, you know that I obviously love reading. I love books. I was an English major in college, so this is something I love and this is something I'm passionate about. But it's so easy just to get out of the habit of reading frequently. So I'm really excited because so far this year, in the past couple of months, I've read 7 books, which I'm not the fastest reader in the world, so this is pretty good for me. To me, that's a win. I know I love watching videos of people talking about the books they read and whether or not they liked them. So I wanted to film one myself, and hopefully if I keep up my trend through the rest of the year, I can do these every couple of months just to update you on what I've been reading, whether or not I liked it, what I recommend, etc, etc. So let's go ahead and jump into the books because that's why we're all here. So I have kind of a variety of things here. I have a few just YA standalone contemporary books. I have an adult fiction book, and I have a couple of YA series to talk about. So the first book is Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda, soon to be a movie. Love Simon. I'm sure you've seen the trailer for it or commercials or ads. If you haven't heard about this movie yet, where have you been? What rock are you living under? This book's about a boy named Simon. He's 16, he's in high school, and he's also secretly gay. Until, essentially, it's not so secret anymore, and someone finds out and blackmails him into doing things to keep from telling his secret to the entire school, basically. I picked up this book for obvious reasons. First one being, it's gonna be a movie. I love reading books that are gonna be movies. And to be honest, I wanted to read this book, but I also wasn't expecting to be blown away by it because it seemed like a fairly simple concept. I expected it to be kind of a cutesy romance book, throughout Simon's emailing this guy. He doesn't know who it is, but he's obsessing over him, right? I expected it to be an Everything Everything or an Eleanor and Park or that kind of cutesy romance-centered plot, if you know what I mean. But I was actually blown away by this book in that it was kind of what I expected, but it also wasn't at all what I expected. First and foremost, I loved reading from Simon's point of view. I thought he was funny, I thought he was interesting and relatable, and he wasn't just a typical character, not just because he was gay, but just in general, the way his character is written, I felt was unique compared to other books I've read like this. And the story was great because it had a really good balance of tension and mystery with the lighthearted and romantic stuff that you expect from a book like this. So it had a little more depth than I would have originally expected it to have, which is great. And overall, it's a fun read, it's a quick read. I think I read this in 3 hours one night. Super fast. You can blow through this pretty quickly if you're ready to see the movie in a week. Go ahead and read it. It's not going to take you long. I give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And an obvious follow-up to the last book would be another book by the same author, The Upside of Unrequited. This book is about a girl named Molly who's had 26 crushes and no boyfriends. I relate. But then her twin sister gets into a relationship and she starts to kind of feel the pressure of I'm 17, I haven't had a boyfriend yet, I feel lonely without one, what the heck do I do? So she feels the loneliness hard, and she feels the need to get a boyfriend fast. Compared to Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda, this one was much more stereotypical, or what I expected from a YA contemporary fiction book. It's told from Molly's perspective. She's a very relatable character. I liked her a lot, but while the character was good, I felt the story kind of lacked in comparison. Not that it wasn't good, it was good, it just wasn't it didn't exceed my expectations by any means. I'll put it that way. And only really because I've seen the same version of a 17-year-old is desperate for her first boyfriend and her first kiss over and over again. It's not a unique concept by any means. So it was good, but it wasn't overwhelmingly good. So for that, I give it 3 out of 5 stars. And lastly, for the YA standalone contemporary fiction books, I have Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. This one's description is short, so I'll just read it. One cold night, in a most unlikely corner of Chicago, two strangers cross paths. Two teens with the same name, running in two very different circles, suddenly find their lives going in new and unexpected directions, culminating in heroic turns of heart and the most epic musical ever to grace the high school stage. Going into this was the only John Green book that I had not read, while also being the only David Levithan book that I have ever read. So starting off, I went into it with kind of a weird perspective, where I kind of knew what to expect, but I also didn't know what to expect. And I liked the two Will Graysons well enough. Like, they were different, but they were also the same in certain ways, and reading like back and forth between their two characters, I really liked that. I thought that was interesting to look at like two guys, same name, but who grew up like in different areas of Chicago. How are they similar? How are they different? How do their lives kind of intertwine? Like, that was an interesting thing that was unique to this book that I really liked. What I didn't love was the surprising third main character to the story. So I liked this book at the beginning, I liked the concept, I liked where it was going, but somewhere in the middle, it just kind of changed for me, and suddenly I just didn't feel like the story was really about like the Will Graysons anymore, which in retrospect might have been the point, but it was an odd decision. So basically, without spoiling anything, I promise, there's a third character in here named Tiny Cooper who just felt like an over-dramatic cliche to me. Like, it would have been fine as like a secondary character, but when it's a secondary character who like becomes a really important character, I just was on the fence about it. And overall, like, I loved the theme of this book. It's really about friendships and like loving your friends and caring for your friends, even if they're not what you expect them to be or not what you necessarily want them to be. Like, it's about loving them anyway and loving them for their flaws. And I love reading a book that's about friendships more so than it is about relationships. But I'm giving it 3 stars because I liked the concept, but I'm not totally sure if I'm on board with the execution. That being said, it's still a good book. Like, all of these are good books, so even if I don't give them like an amazing review, doesn't mean you shouldn't read them if they interest you. Now for an adult fiction book, which I don't read super often, but the concept of this one really caught my attention. So I went to Barnes & Noble, I opened this book, and I read, "If you knew the date of your death, how would you live your life?" And I was like, I'll give you my money right now. So this book is about 4 siblings in 1969 who go to see a psychic who can supposedly tell them the day they will die. Crazy concept, right? So obviously, like, I loved the concept of this book. I was really excited to read it. It's not very often I hear a concept of a book that just really makes me want to read it, like, immediately. And my only gripe about it, no, I'm gonna start with the good first. So the concept was good, and it was definitely enough to like carry me through this book. Like, even though there was stuff about it that I didn't love, even though there was stuff that bugged me or wasn't totally into, the concept was interesting enough to make me want to get to the end. So like, if the concept of this alone is interesting to you like it was to me, I still recommend reading it. It was still interesting enough. Just again, I didn't love the execution of things. I think my biggest frustration with this one is that there wasn't enough character development for me. Like, if you're gonna write a book about 4 characters that follow them through their entire lives until they're dead, like, I want to care about them. And I just feel like it lacked in that I didn't get to know any of the characters well enough to really care, or really get to know them, or really understand who they were. I just feel like the writer kept you and the character at such a distance, and I don't know if that was like an intentional choice. But I will say the final part, like the last sibling, the very last character in this book, was the best one. And also, I just feel like if you have a tagline of a book that's, "If you knew the date of your death, how would you live your life?" you would have like a strong perspective on that question. Like, I just expected a clearer point of view, either from the characters or from the author, of like some sort of answer to that question. And I get that there's not going to be a clear answer to that question, but there was like no clear resolution to that question at all. You kind of got it from the last character, I guess, but I mean, it was there, it just was mediocre. Like, I just expected a clearer, like, stronger point of view. I don't think I'm making any sense. But again, regardless of like my frustrations with this book, I think the concept of this book and the final part, the last character, is enough to make this book worthwhile. So I will give it 3.5 stars. Without the last part, I probably would have given it 2.5 or 3, but I'll bump it up a little bit because the last part was fairly good. Like the ending was fairly good and made it more worthwhile. Now let's move on to some YA series, possibly like my favorite books. I love them so much. I get so into them. Especially this one I became obsessed with, and that is the Six of Crows series, and also its follow-up, Crooked Kingdom. These are so good. In a nutshell, this book is about 6 dangerous outcasts and 1 impossible heist. This series has literally been on my bookshelf for so long, and I don't know why I kept putting off reading it, because I wish I would have read this forever ago. I kept seeing positive reviews everywhere. I never heard a negative word about this book, but for some reason I was always like on the fence about it. Like I just wasn't sure if I would like it. Mostly because I tend to shy away from fantasy books, but after reading this, I don't even know if I would describe it as fantasy. Like there's some elements of fantasy in it, but it's all very grounded like in reality, to the point where it didn't really feel like a fantasy book at all. How would I just read the book description for you? Because I feel like whatever I say, I'm gonna give something away. So criminal prodigy Kaz Brecker is offered a chance at a deadly heist that could make him rich beyond his wildest dreams, but he can't pull it off alone. It says a convict with a thirst for revenge, a sharpshooter who can't walk away from a wager, a runaway with a privileged past, a spy known as the Wraith, a heartrender using her magic to survive the slums, a thief with a gift for unlikely escapes, 6 dangerous outcasts, 1 impossible heist. Kaz's crew is the only thing that might stand between the world and destruction if they don't kill each other first. I don't even know what to say other than, if you're a fan of like YA books, if you liked Hunger Games or liked Divergent but want something better and like much more worthy of the praise, I highly recommend this. I will say, as a warning, it takes a little while to get into, just because like the first 100 or 200 pages are a little difficult, just because the names are odd. It uses some words that just like, you know, because it's somewhat fantasy, there are some words that you just don't know, and there's a little bit of a learning curve to this book. But once you get past the first 100 or 200 pages, it's a lot easier. It goes so much faster, and you will rip through this book. And then once you finish this, you'll have to run to Barnes & Noble like I did in the same day, so you can get the second one. And the second one, Crooked Kingdom, is even better than this one. Somehow. 5 out of 5 stars. I loved the characters, I loved the plot, I loved everything about this book. And because I apparently have to end on a bad note, here's a series that I have a lot of complaints with. I don't know if I ever talked about the other Sarah J Maas series that I read. Last year I read the Throne of Glass series, and I got through the first few books, and then I got so frustrated with it that I did not read any books for the rest of the year. I loved the first couple of books in the Throne of Glass series, so much so that I bought all the books in that series and all the books in this series just preemptively because I thought I was going to love them all. And then halfway through that series, it just plummeted. And I feel so bad saying that because I know a ton of people love this series, and I did really like it at the beginning. And I really don't want to spoil anything, but let me just say, if you're big on like character development, so like for me, character and theme are so much more important than plot. Like, I love a good plot, but it means very little to me if there aren't good characters or good theme to back it up. So like The Immortalists, great plot, didn't have the character and theme to back it up. Throne of Glass series started off with a great plot, started off with great characters, and then halfway through, the characters just... The only way I can describe it, and this is just my own frustration with it, and maybe it's not even true, but it felt like the author just got bored with the characters and decided to just like change them halfway through just to like make it more interesting for her to write it. And I'm so frustrated because I just really wanted to love it so much. So I basically stopped reading, I think, midway through the 5th book because I was just over it. I struggled through the 4th, I struggled through the 5th, and I couldn't do anymore. But then this year, I decided to give it another chance because I'd already bought the series, and I started reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I actually really liked this book. So let me just take a step back and read the synopsis for you. When 19-year-old Huntress kills a wolf in the woods, a beast-like creature arrives to demand retribution. Dragged to a treacherous magical land she knows only from legends, Feyre discovers that her captor is not an animal, but one of the lethal immortal fairies who once ruled their world. Blah blah blah. essentially it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like, just as like an overarching generalization. I liked it. Like, the writing was good. I was into it. Again, the characters were good. The plot was good. I was intrigued. Like, I enjoyed reading this first book. But because I've read a series of hers before, I was apprehensive to continue. So let me just say, I spoiled myself on the second book of this series because I just wanted to know what I was getting into. And it appears as though a similar thing occurs in this series as did with the other one. And God, I feel like I have to choose my words so carefully. If you like YA fantasy books with a good plot, a lot of romance, maybe you like Beauty and the Beast retelling, if you're just like really in the mood for a good fantasy series and you don't give a crap about characters, go for it. Like, really great book. Also recommend Throne of Glass, like, go for it. Now, if you're anything like me and you get frustrated when the middle of a series basically makes the first few books obsolete, proceed with caution. This book in and of itself, I will give 4 stars. Like, it had me intrigued, it was good, it wasn't super original, but like the writing was good, the characters were good, I was pulled in, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The series as a whole, I'm like proactively giving 1.5 stars before ever having read it. I understand that's maybe frustrating to you, but I'm having a lot of internal conflict about it, and I want to keep reading, I want to give it a chance, but I just don't know. I feel bad for ending this on such a bad note, or such a confusing note. I'm sure you're all like, what the hell, if you haven't already like clicked off of this video already. I feel like I confused myself in the midst of this rant, but I've actually been like really frustrated with this book for like a long time, and I've been like itching to get my thoughts out, even though I'm trying to do it without spoiling anything for you, which is why I probably am making no sense. But regardless, let's just end this video here. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you thought differently about any of these books, or if you agree with me, let me know. If you liked a book I didn't like, awesome. I'm so excited for you. That's great. I want to like every book that I ever pick up. If you didn't like a book that I liked, I'm sure anyone who is questioning whether or not they want to read it would love to hear your comments. So this isn't all about my opinions. Leave your own reviews in the comments. I love to hear them. I'm sure everyone watching this would love to hear them. And let me know if you'd like to see something like this again, or if you want to recommend other books to me. I will take those recommendations and I will read them. And with that said, I think that's it. Other than to say, as I always do, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye guys!